2 years
He
ago,
said he owned
Sam
nothing.
Altman sat before the United States Senate and told lawmakers he
equity
owned
in
no
OpenAI.
equity in OpenAI.
Was that true?
This month, federal courtroom evidence raised serious questions about whether that statement was ever completely true. And as OpenAI races toward a $1 trillion IPO, former executives are accusing the company of deception and internal chaos. What emerged from that Oakland courtroom was not routine litigation risk. It was a documented picture of how OpenAI was really built. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will understand something most people will never see coming. Before we enter that courtroom, we need to answer one important question. Why does any of this actually matter to you? You are probably not a hedge fund manager. You probably do not have lawyers reviewing IPO filings late at night. So why spend 20 minutes listening to a lawsuit involving billionaires and one of the most powerful AI companies on Earth? Here is why. OpenAI is preparing to go public at a valuation reportedly approaching $1 trillion. That would make it the largest IPO in American history, bigger than almost anything Wall Street has ever seen.
Record-breaking valuation expected.
And here is the part almost nobody in financial media is seriously talking about right now. If OpenAI joins the S&P 500 after listing, every passive index fund tracking it automatically owns shares. That means ordinary Americans could end up owning OpenAI through retirement accounts without ever consciously deciding to invest. People who have never heard of Mira Murati or OpenAI governance policies could still become indirect shareholders. This is not just a personal feud between Elon Musk and Sam Altman anymore. This is a story about whether serious governance failures get quietly packaged into ordinary Americans' retirement savings. So let's go through exactly what was said under oath inside that federal courtroom. First, one detail most media coverage has completely misunderstood from the very beginning. Musk is not suing OpenAI for $150 billion so he can personally keep the money.
Damages to be directed to nonprofit entity.
If damages are awarded, the money would reportedly return to the original OpenAI nonprofit entity. The case was filed in the Northern District of California, where closing arguments recently concluded before a federal jury. The core legal claims are breach of charitable trust and unjust enrichment involving OpenAI's transition into a for-profit structure. Musk argues OpenAI's talent, intellectual property, and computing resources were redirected for private financial gain. Microsoft was also named as a defendant because it allegedly helped accelerate and enable that transformation. Musk originally contributed roughly $38 million in early seed funding between 2015 and 2017. Now he is using that founding history to argue the company was built using assets meant for a nonprofit. To understand the scale, OpenAI recently closed a funding round valuing the company at roughly $850 billion. The IPO number now being discussed is closer to $1 trillion, making this lawsuit extremely significant financially. In a normal IPO process, a lawsuit worth 15% of company value becomes the biggest disclosed risk factor. But here, the lawsuit is competing with everything else revealed under oath during the trial. And that is exactly where things stopped looking like a routine corporate legal dispute. Then the trial took a much darker and more uncomfortable turn for OpenAI leadership. Because the next witness was not an outsider, rival, or disgruntled former employee seeking revenge. She was one of the people who helped build OpenAI from the inside over 6 years. Mira Murati, OpenAI's former chief technology officer, testified through recorded video shown in court. She described internal chaos and a CEO who allegedly communicated contradictory information to different people.
A CEO who allegedly communicated contradictory information.
Murati testified that Altman was not consistently transparent with the board overseeing the company. She also claimed executives were deliberately positioned against each other to maintain centralized control. That alone would have been damaging for any company preparing for a historic public offering.
That alone would have been damaging for any company preparing for a historic public offering.
Then Murati made one allegation that reportedly stopped the entire courtroom cold. She claimed Altman told employees a new AI model had passed legal review when it allegedly had not.
One message, one form, two.
According to her testimony, that statement was used to bypass OpenAI's own internal safety review process.
The system said yes. Nobody asked it.
Read that carefully. The company built around AI safety allegedly ignored its own safeguards internally. If true, that is not a management disagreement. It is a direct betrayal of public trust.
The record speaks for itself.
Then the courtroom screens displayed private messages from the night Sam Altman was suddenly fired. After being removed, Altman reportedly asked Murati whether he could still enter OpenAI headquarters. She told him the people now in charge did not want him inside the building. Think about that image for a moment. The face of modern AI locked out of his own company. Now here is the legal reality that changes everything for future OpenAI investors. Any S-1 filing submitted for the IPO must legally disclose Murati's testimony as material litigation risk. That testimony cannot be erased through settlement negotiations, media campaigns, or carefully managed public relations. Her words are permanently embedded inside the public record and future investor disclosures. And institutional investors always read the risk section of a major IPO prospectus first.
No, you do right.
But the courtroom drama was only beginning. The next witness changed everything again.
Do you swear to tell the truth? Do you swear to tell the truth?
The jury then heard testimony from OpenAI co-founder and former chief scientist Ilya Sutskever. Sutskever was not an outsider. He was one of the most respected AI researchers in the world.
What he knew, nobody else could claim to know.
He testified that removing Altman was not impulsive emotion or temporary internal political conflict. According to Sutskever, it followed nearly a full year of evidence gathering and investigation. He described what he believed was a deliberate and consistent pattern of dishonesty from Altman. Not isolated communication mistakes, a deliberate pattern documented over roughly 12 months. Sutskever reportedly assembled a 52-page document and presented it directly to OpenAI's board. That document ultimately helped trigger the decision to remove Sam Altman as chief executive officer. Let that sink in. A co-founder spent 1 year building a detailed case against his own CEO. Sutskever also disclosed his personal ownership stake in OpenAI at approximately $7 billion.
$7 billion. And he still testified.
This was not a disgruntled outsider attacking the company. This was a deeply invested insider. Then came the part almost nobody expected to hear under oath inside federal court. Sutskever admitted he later voted to bring Altman back as CEO after the board removed him. He described the decision as a Hail Mary intended to prevent the company from collapsing entirely. Not because concerns were resolved, not because evidence disappeared, but because internal pressure exploded. The co-founder who built the case against Altman ultimately voted to reinstate him anyway. That is not a stable governance structure. That sounds more like institutional panic at trillion-dollar scale.
That sounds more like institutional panic.
Before we continue, subscribe if you enjoy financial investigations the mainstream press rarely fully explains, because what came next may have been even more damaging than everything already revealed inside the courtroom. Then came Greg Brockman, OpenAI president, and another named defendant in the ongoing lawsuit. Brockman disclosed a personal stake in OpenAI reportedly worth nearly $30 billion.
20% of the $150 billion lawsuit. $30 billion. And a diary.
But the most explosive evidence was not his spoken testimony. It was his private diary.
What he wrote when nobody was watching.
Around 100 pages of personal journal entries were introduced directly into the court record. One entry from 2017 reportedly asked what it would financially take to reach $1 billion. Another entry discussed converting the non-profit structure without involvement from the original donors. Brockman was compelled to read those private diary passages aloud inside open federal court.
He read every word.
Imagine that moment. A $30 billion tech executive publicly reading private journal entries under oath. Whatever context surrounded those entries, they are now permanently attached to OpenAI's public legal history.
Confirming the diary entries.
This changes the valuation. No.
Every institutional investor evaluating the IPO will eventually read those same courtroom disclosures. Then on the very same day, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella took the witness stand. Microsoft currently holds one of the largest financial stakes in OpenAI through its massive investment partnership. Nadella described the entire 2023 board crisis using one very damaging word: amateurish. Think about that carefully. $228 billion exposed, and the word chosen was amateurish. Nadella testified he was never clearly informed why Altman had initially been removed from leadership.
You cannot see what you do not know to ask.
The company risking billions in OpenAI apparently did not fully understand what was happening internally. That statement is now part of the permanent record every future investor will eventually review. But even that was not the most alarming detail revealed during the proceedings. A court filing then revealed Sam Altman personally held major stakes in multiple OpenAI business partners. Those investments were reportedly valued at more than $2 billion by the end of 2025. One of the largest holdings involved Helion Energy, where Altman allegedly owns roughly one-third ownership.
The CEO buys from himself.
OpenAI also signed agreements to purchase energy from Helion while Altman served as board chair. That means OpenAI was financially supporting a company its own CEO personally heavily owned.
Who approved this circuit? Someone signed this. Someone approved this.
That is not a tiny disclosure hidden in fine print.
That is not a tiny disclosure hidden in fine
That
print.
is a major governance concern.
The expert has a recommendation. The investor has a decision.
Altman also reportedly held large stakes in Stripe, Retro Biosciences, and Cerebras Systems. The Cerebras relationship especially alarmed observers because OpenAI procurement decisions could directly increase Altman's wealth. The CEO's personal investment portfolio could benefit from company contracts signed under his own leadership. Now place all of that beside Altman's earlier Senate testimony claiming he held no OpenAI equity.
One line, two documents, one question.
Courtroom evidence reportedly raised serious questions about whether that testimony was fully accurate. Then congressional scrutiny intensified almost immediately after the courtroom revelations became public. House Oversight Chairman James Comer demanded documents tied to OpenAI's internal audit investigations. Multiple Republican state attorneys general also requested formal SEC review ahead of the anticipated IPO. Now step back and look at the entire picture all at once. A former CTO alleging safety processes were bypassed to accelerate product releases inside OpenAI. A co-founder spending 1 year documenting concerns about the company's chief executive officer. A company president reading private diary entries aloud in federal court under legal compulsion. The largest outside investor describing internal governance using the word amateurish while under oath.
One more.
And a CEO holding billions in investments across companies actively receiving business from OpenAI itself. Any single one of those issues would matter in a major IPO filing. Together, they create the exact governance profile many institutional funds are specifically trained to avoid. But while media cameras focused entirely on Oakland, something even bigger was happening elsewhere. The most significant power shift in artificial intelligence was quietly unfolding in Memphis, Tennessee. On February 2nd, SpaceX completed an acquisition involving Elon Musk's AI company, xAI.
This changes everything. A $1 trillion competitor.
The combined valuation reportedly approached $1.25 trillion after the merger finalized. That deal placed xAI infrastructure directly inside the broader SpaceX ecosystem and operational structure. The merger gave SpaceX control of the massive Colossus One AI data center facility.
220,000 reasons to pay attention to Memphis.
That center reportedly contained 220,000 GPUs and enormous amounts of electrical power capacity. Meanwhile, XAI had already shifted training operations to an even larger facility called Colossus II.
Colossus I was already obsolete.
As a result, Colossus I was reportedly operating far below its full infrastructure capacity.
As a result,
Then, on May 6th, Anthropic signed a deal leasing the entire remaining GPU capacity. All 220,000 GPUs were reportedly leased under a major long-term infrastructure agreement. Analysts estimated the arrangement could generate between $3 and $6 billion annually for SpaceX. Now pause and think about how strategically unbelievable this entire situation really is. Musk was simultaneously attacking OpenAI in federal court while financially empowering OpenAI's fastest-growing competitor. At the exact moment cameras focused on the lawsuit, Musk was helping Anthropic rapidly scale infrastructure. That is not a contradiction. It looks much more like a calculated long-term strategic move. Because the future AI war may ultimately be decided less in courtrooms and more inside data centers. Anthropic now controls compute capacity operating at a scale rivaling nearly every major industry competitor.
One deal, top-tier compute.
The company reportedly expanded through AWS, Google partnerships, Azure capacity, and now SpaceX infrastructure access. Anthropic's annualized revenue reportedly exploded from a few billion to nearly $30 billion recently. Some analysts now estimate Anthropic's implied valuation approaching roughly $1 trillion on secondary markets.
At the same time,
That would place Anthropic above OpenAI's recent secondary valuation estimates during this courtroom battle. Think about how dramatically the balance of power shifted in only 12 months.
The shift is not finished.
Step back from the courtroom and look instead at the infrastructure map shaping artificial intelligence. OpenAI remains deeply tied into Microsoft Azure alongside Oracle, CoreWeave, and Stargate compute relationships. Anthropic, however, operates through a more diversified infrastructure strategy spread across multiple major providers. AWS, Google, Azure, and now SpaceX all contribute to Anthropic's expanding compute ecosystem. Meanwhile, SpaceX trains Grok internally while also leasing infrastructure directly to competing AI companies. This is no longer a simple AI race dominated entirely by OpenAI and Microsoft alone. It has become a three-way struggle involving OpenAI, Anthropic, and the expanding SpaceX AI ecosystem. And inside that rapidly shifting landscape, OpenAI remains the company currently sitting inside federal court. So what does all this actually mean for the OpenAI IPO itself moving forward? There are three realistic scenarios investors now need to seriously consider before the offering arrives.
The choice is made with evidence. Here is the evidence.
Scenario 1. The IPO still prices successfully despite all governance concerns and courtroom revelations.
In this scenario, ordinary Americans...
The market absorbs the controversy because investors remain obsessed with artificial intelligence growth potential. The IPO launches between $800 billion and $1 trillion during late 2026.
The discount is the story's impact quantified, assuming that word is doing a lot of work.
Then S&P 500 inclusion forces passive index funds and retirement accounts to automatically buy shares. That means ordinary investors gain exposure whether they consciously approve of OpenAI governance or not. Meanwhile, early insiders were already selling shares privately at valuations far below the IPO target. Back in 2025, hundreds of OpenAI employees reportedly sold billions in stock around $400 billion valuation. Think carefully about that. Insiders sold at less than half the valuation public investors may eventually pay. The people closest to OpenAI priced shares dramatically lower than future retail buyers could be offered. Scenario 2. Governance pressure forces the IPO to launch at a substantially reduced valuation instead. The SEC demands stronger disclosures while institutional investors insist on discounts before participating in the offering. In that scenario, the IPO clears closer to $500 or $700 billion.
Future investors pay a more justified price. The redistribution visible.
Painful for early investors,
Who bears
perhaps,
the cost of governance
but arguably
failures?
more honest for future public market
The
shareholders.
IPO price is the market's answer.
Scenario 3. The entire IPO process gets delayed until sometime during 2027 or later. The SEC refuses approval until governance questions and structural issues are fully addressed internally. Competitive pressure from Anthropic intensifies while OpenAI struggles with mounting legal and political scrutiny. The final verdict in Musk's lawsuit may arrive soon, but that may no longer be the central issue. Because the sworn testimony from Murati, Sutskever, Brockman, and Nadella now permanently exists in public records. Any OpenAI IPO filing must address every one of those allegations directly and transparently for investors. And any investor buying through an index fund automatically inherits all associated governance risk exposure.
The mechanism operates without consent. Now they know.
The smartest money in this industry positioned itself long before this courtroom drama ever became public. But for retail investors considering the IPO, the internal picture is now impossible to completely ignore. The people who profited most during earlier tech bubbles understood one important lesson before everyone else did. Governance seems irrelevant during rapid growth phases until suddenly it becomes the only thing that matters. OpenAI is not Theranos. The technology, growth, and revenue are all undeniably very real. But $1 trillion valuation means investors are also buying management culture and leadership credibility.
And leadership credibility.
And those exact elements spent weeks being questioned under oath inside a federal courtroom. The testimony came from OpenAI insiders, former executives, co-founders, and Microsoft's own chief executive officer. Make of that what you will, but investors should understand the full picture before buying anything. If this breakdown helped clarify what is truly at stake in the OpenAI IPO, subscribe for more. We cover the financial and legal stories shaping how power and money actually move beneath the headlines. And if you want the deeper story about AI financing structures across Microsoft, Amazon, and Google, watch next. This is the US Code. I will see you in the next video.